listener. You've arrived at a space where nothing is urgent, where the noise of the day no longer matters, and where your only task is to rest. Here, the stories you hear are not meant to be solved or rushed through, but simply experienced, like watching clouds drift across the sky. Take a moment to get comfortable. Feel the support beneath you, the gentle weight of your body, the rhythm of your breathing. With each breath, you are stepping further away from the busy thoughts of the day and closer to a quieter world inside yourself. This is your time, a time to let go of the lists, the worries, the what-ifs, a time to give your mind permission to slow down, to wander, and to dream. Tonight's story will guide you gently, carrying you like a soft current toward peace, and then toward sleep. So settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let the words become a gentle backdrop to your own inner journey. You don't need to follow every detail. You don't need to hold on. Just allow yourself to be carried slowly into rest. Once, in a time that was neither long ago nor very recent, nestled between the shoulders of ancient slumbering mountains, lay a forest. It was not a place of sharp edges or sudden dangers, but a realm of soft moss, dappled light, and deep, quiet thoughts. The people who lived in the tidy, well-lit towns on its borders called it the Whispering Woods, for the wind there never howled. It only ever seemed to be sharing a secret. Our story is about a man named Elias. By all accounts, Elias was a success. He was the Royal Cartographer, a man whose life was dedicated to lines, measurements, and the certainty of knowing precisely where one stood. His maps were masterpieces of detail. He could chart the curve of a coastline from a ship's deck and calculate the height of a mountain with a glance. His work hung in the halls of kings and the studies of scholars. Yet Elias was profoundly tired. He was tired in a way that sleep could not fix, a weariness that had settled deep in his bones like a winter frost. His world had become a grid of his own making. Every day was measured, every hour allocated. His joy, once found in the elegant curl of an unmapped river, had been replaced by the anxious pressure of the blank spaces on his parchments. He dreamed not of adventure, but of deadlines. The world, for him, had lost its magic. It had become a series of points to be plotted and problems to be solved. One evening, while poring over a dusty tome in the Royal Library, searching for unrecorded territories, he found a curious footnote. It was written in a faint, looping script, an anomaly in a book of rigid facts. It spoke of the Whispering Woods and said, "This forest cannot be mapped, for its paths are drawn not with soil and stone, but with memory and mood. To find your way, you must lose it first, and to chart its heart, you must lay down your instruments and learn to listen." A flicker of something, not quite hope, but a deep, resonant curiosity stirred in Elias's chest. A place that could not be mapped. It was a professional affront, an irresistible challenge. But deeper than that, It was a whisper of a different way of being, a life not bound by straight lines and rigid certainties. That night, for the first time in years, he made a decision not based on logic, but on a longing he couldn't name. He would go to the Whispering Woods. He packed his finest compasses, his most accurate sextant, his sharpest styluses, and rolls of pristine vellum. He was Elias, the Royal Cartographer. He would map the unmappable. He would conquer this wilderness with reason and precision. The edge of the forest was deceptively simple. A gentle curtain of silver birch trees gave way to a path strewn with soft, rust-colored pine needles. The air grew cooler, smelling of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the clean, sweet scent of fern. The cacophony of the city faded behind him, replaced by a profound and enveloping quiet. It was not an empty silence, but one filled with a million tiny sounds. The scuttling of a beetle, the slow unfurling of a leaf, the gentle sigh of the trees breathing. Elias set to work immediately. He took a bearing with his compass, made a note of the sun's position, and began to pace out distances, sketching the lay of the land onto his vellum. For the first few hours, it went well. The path was clear, the trees orderly. But as the sun began to dip lower, painting the canopy in hues of gold and rose, strange things began to happen. He would walk 100 paces north, mark his position, and turn to walk 100 paces east, only to find himself back at the exact spot he started. His compass needle, which had served him faithfully across continents, began to spin lazily, as if bored. He'd follow a path that seemed clear and straight, and it would dissolve into a thicket of ferns, leaving him standing in a circle of toadstools. Frustration, a feeling he knew well, began to prick at him. He was a master of his craft. He understood the world through its physical laws. This forest was breaking them, mocking his expertise. As dusk deepened into a soft, velvety twilight, Elias was well and truly lost. He slumped against the trunk of an enormous oak, his expensive tools lying useless at his feet. The forest, which had seemed so peaceful, now felt immense and unknowable. He had come to conquer it, and instead he felt utterly and completely small. He was not the Royal Cartographer here. He was just a tired man in the woods. He closed his eyes, expecting to feel a surge of panic. Instead, a wave of profound relief washed over him. In being lost, he was finally free from the pressure of knowing the way. For the first time in a very long time, he had no plan, no schedule, no destination. There was nothing to do but be. He must have dozed off, for when he opened his eyes again, the forest was bathed in the gentle, milky light of a full moon. The world was silver and shadow, and he was not alone. Seated on a mossy stone nearby was a figure. It was hard to tell if she was old or young. Her form seemed woven from the very fabric of the forest itself. Her hair was like trailing moss, dotted phosphorescent glow of tiny fungi. Her eyes held the deep, starry wisdom of a night sky, and her hands, which rested in her lap, were constantly in motion, weaving threads of what looked like moonlight and shadow into a small, intricate pattern. "Your lines are very straight," she said, her voice like the rustle of leaves. "They do not bend for the roots of trees, nor do they curve with the flow of water." Elias, startled, could only stare. Who are you?" "Some call me Lyra," she said, her fingers never ceasing their dance. "I am the weaver of this place. I mend the torn edges of twilight and stitch the silence of the night. You, cartographer, seem to be trying to pin the world to a page. But the world does not like to be pinned. It likes to breathe." Elias looked at his vellum, now damp with dew, the rigid black lines seeming stark and foolish in the gentle moonlight. "I am lost," he admitted, the words tasting strange and true on his tongue. Lyra smiled, a slow, kind expression that seemed to crinkle the corners of her ancient eyes. "Excellent," she said. "That is the very best place to begin. To find the heart of this forest, you must learn its 3 great secrets. But they cannot be taught with words alone. You must feel them." She rose, her form flowing like water, and gestured for him to follow. He left his instruments where they lay, a silent surrender, and walked behind her, deeper into the silvered woods. Their first stop was a small, perfectly circular pool. The water was as black and still as polished obsidian, reflecting the moon and stars so perfectly that it felt like looking into the depths of space. "This is the silent pool," Lyra whispered, her voice barely disturbing the air. "The first secret is learning to listen." "I hear nothing," Elias said after a moment, straining his ears. "That is because you are listening for something," she replied gently. "You are listening for a sound to measure, to identify. Stop listening for... just listen." Elias was confused, but he did as she suggested. He sat on the damp earth, closed his eyes, and tried to empty his mind of expectation. It was difficult. His brain, so used to activity, kept trying to label sensations. The coolness of the air, the scent of moss, the pressure of the ground beneath him. But slowly, patiently, he let those thoughts drift away like clouds, and then he began to hear it. It wasn't a sound in the way he knew it. It was a low, resonant hum, far below the range of his normal hearing. It was the thrum of the roots burrowing deeper into the earth. It was the patient, silent conversation of the trees, sharing nutrients through their interconnected network. He could feel, more than hear, the slow, contented pulse of life itself, the quiet, unceasing music of what is. It asked for nothing. It simply was. He felt the frantic, buzzing energy within him begin to quiet, to attune itself to this slower, deeper rhythm. He sat there for what felt like an eternity, breathing in time with the forest until the distinction between himself and the living world around him began to blur. When he finally opened his eyes, he felt a stillness he hadn't experienced since he was a small boy lying in a field, watching the clouds. "Your maps show where things are," Lyra said softly, her weaving continuing in the dim light. "But they do not show how they feel. They do not show their song." Next, Lyra led him through a part of the forest where the trees grew in strange stooped shapes, their branches heavy with thick gray moss that hung like ancient beards. The ground here was soft and littered with objects that seemed out of place. A single child's shoe, its leather cracked with age, a small tarnished silver locket, a beautifully carved wooden bird with one wing missing. "This is the Grove of Forgotten Things," Lyra explained. "This is where you will learn the second secret, the art of letting go." Elias looked at the sad, lost objects. "It feels sorrowful here." "Only if you believe that to be forgotten is to be lost," she corrected. "Here, things are not lost. They are released. A promise that was too heavy to carry, a grief that had served its purpose, a dream that was meant for a different life. They come here to rest, to become part of the soil again. They are not sorrowful. They are peaceful." She gestured for him to walk among them. As he did, his foot nudged something half buried in the leaves. He bent down and picked it up. It was a small, clumsily whittled wooden knife. He recognized it instantly. He had carved it himself as a boy, a secret treasure he had mourned for weeks after losing it on a family outing. Holding it now, he felt a phantom ache of that childhood loss, but it was faint, distant. Then he saw something else lying near the roots of a gnarled willow. It was an ethereal, shimmering object that looked like one of his maps, but it was creased and folded with anxiety. It depicted not a place, but a path of his life he deeply regretted, a friendship he had neglected in his pursuit of success. He had carried the weight of that mistake for years, going over and over it in his mind, the lines of what if etched into his soul. "You carry it everywhere." Lyra's voice was gentle beside him. "You fold it and refold it, hoping the creases will change the path, but they only make the parchment weaker." Elias reached out a trembling hand. He expected the map of regret to feel heavy, but it was as light as smoke. "You do not have to forget it," said Lyra. "You only have to put it down. Let it rest here, with the other things that have served their time. Thank it for what it taught you, and let it go." He took a deep breath, the clean, earthy scent of the grove filling his lungs. He thought of his old friend, not with the sharp pain of regret, but with a soft, warm sadness. He had made a mistake. It had taught him about ambition, about priorities. It was a part of his story. It did not have to be its anchor. With a quiet intention, he placed the shimmering map on the soft moss. It settled. Its anxious light dimmed, and it began to look as if it, too, was breathing a sigh of relief. A knot he hadn't even realized he was carrying in his chest began to dissolve. The third and final place Lyra took him to was a river. Unlike the silent pool, this river was full of movement and life. Its waters were crystal clear, but as Elias looked into them, he didn't see the stones on the riverbed. He saw fleeting images. He saw himself accepting a grand award, his face stern and unsmiling. He saw himself old and alone, surrounded by maps. He saw himself teaching a young apprentice, his face full of light. He saw 100, 1,000 different futures, all swirling and tumbling over each other in the current. "This is the river of possibilities," Lyra said. "And the final secret is learning to be present." Elias felt a familiar anxiety tighten its grip on him. This was the source of his sleepless nights, the endless branching paths of the future, the constant worry about making the right choice, the fear of ending up on the wrong one. He felt dizzy watching the endless flow of what might be. "It's too much," he said, stepping back from the bank. "How can anyone choose? How can you know which path is right?" Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she bent down and picked up a single, smooth, gray stone from the river's edge. She placed it in Elias's palm. It was cool and solid, its surface worn satiny by the endless flow of water. "You are not the river," she said softly. "You cannot control its flow or see its destination. You are this stone, right here, right now. Feel its weight in your hand. Feel its coolness against your skin. This is real. The river is just a story of what could be. The stone is what is." Elias focused on the stone. He felt its perfect, simple reality. It was just a stone. It wasn't worried about where the river was going. It wasn't regretting the mountain it came from. It was just here, now, in his hand. He closed his hand around it, the solidness a comfort. He looked at the river again, but this time he didn't try to decipher the images. He just watched the light dance on the surface of the water, listened to the gentle, burbling sound it made as it flowed past. The future could wait. It would arrive one moment at a time, just as the river flowed one drop at a time. The only moment he had to live in was this one. They spent the rest of the night not talking, but simply being. Lyra continued her weaving, her threads of moonlight catching the dreams of the sleeping forest. Elias watched her, no longer trying to understand the mechanics of her magic, but simply appreciating its beauty. He watched as tiny, luminous moths, with wings like powdered moonbeams, fluttered down to drink nectar from night-blooming flowers. They weren't building nests or gathering food for winter. Their only purpose seemed to be to exist, to flutter, to be beautiful for a brief time in the soft darkness. Their simple, unproductive being felt like a profound revelation as the first pale fingers of dawn began to stretch across the sky, tinting the edges of the world in soft lavender and rose. Lyra stopped her weaving. She held out the small tapestry she'd been working on all night. It was a map, but it was unlike any map Elias had ever seen. There were no lines of longitude or latitude, no scales of distance. Instead, it was a map of sensation. A patch of deep, soft green velvet depicted the feeling of the moss by the silent pool. A swirl of shimmering silver thread captured the sound of the river. A small, rough patch of brown wool held the solid, grounding feeling of the stone in his hand. It was a map of his journey through the night, a map of experience. "The world is not a problem to be solved, cartographer," Lyra said, her eyes kind. "It is a story to be lived, a song to be heard, a tapestry to be felt. Your old maps were true, but they were not whole. They showed the body of the world, but not its soul." Elias took the tapestry. It felt warm in his hands. He looked from the woven map to the forest around him. chirps and rustles of the waking day, and he finally understood. He had come here to impose his order on the wild, but the wild had gifted him with its own, far deeper order. He did not know how he found his way back to the edge of the forest. The path seemed to simply appear before him, as if the woods were gently guiding him home. When he emerged from the shade of the silver birches into the bright morning sun, he turned back and saw his tools lying where he had left them. He picked them up, but they felt different in his hands. No longer weapons of control, but tools of interpretation. Elias returned to the city, but he was not the same man who had left. He was quieter, slower. He still made maps, but they were different now. He still used his lines and measurements, for they had their own truth, but he began to add other things. He would use a swirl of blue ink to indicate not just a river, but the sound it made. He would use a softer, stippled texture on his vellum to show where the moss grew thickest and the air was quietest. His maps began to include notes in the margins. Here, the wind sings through the pines, or in this valley, the silence is deep and restful. Some of his colleagues scoffed. They called his new work imprecise, sentimental. But others, the travelers, the poets, the tired souls like himself, found them to be the truest maps they had ever seen. People began to use his maps not just to find a place, but to find a feeling, a place of quiet, a patch of sun, a moment of peace. Elias never lost the weariness in his bones completely, for that is part of the human story. But now he knew what to do with it. On nights when the world felt too loud and the lines on his pages too sharp, he would take out the small tapestry Lyra had given him. He would run his fingers over the threads of moonlight and shadow, and he would remember the 3 secrets. He would remember to listen, not for an answer, but for the quiet music of his own breath and the steady, patient beat of his own heart. He would remember to let go, to place the heavy regrets of yesterday and the anxious maps of tomorrow down on the soft moss of his mind, allowing them to rest. And he would remember to be present, to feel the simple, solid reality of the moment he was in, the warmth of his blankets, the coolness of the air, the gentle weight of his body settling into rest. And so, as the world outside your own window now softens into shadow and silver, perhaps you can feel the spirit of the whispering woods around you. You don't need to journey to a mythical forest to find its peace. It exists in the quiet spaces between your thoughts. Listen. Can you hear it? The gentle, humming music of your own being. A quiet and steady song that has been with you all along. Let go. Picture all the worries of the day, all the tangled paths of tomorrow, as shimmering maps of light. You don't need to solve them tonight. Just gently place them down on the cool, soft earth. Let them rest. They will be there in the morning, and perhaps by then they will seem a little lighter. And now, be present. Feel the gentle weight of the blankets upon you, a comforting and solid pressure. Feel the air as you breathe in, cool and clean, and as you breathe out, warm and soft. This moment, this very breath, it is the only thing that is real, and it is peaceful. It is enough. There are no lines to draw, no problems to solve. There is only the slow, gentle tide of slumber, pulling you out into a calm and quiet sea. The paths of your dreams are not made of soil and stone, but of memory and moonlight. And to find your way there, all you need to do is let go. and listen to the whisper of the night as it welcomes you home to rest. And now the story has reached its quiet ending. The words can fade like distant echoes while you remain here in the stillness you found. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to chase, only the slow rhythm of your breath, the steady beat of your heart, and the gentle tide of sleep rising within you. Allow your thoughts to loosen, like threads unraveling. If worries come, let them drift away like clouds passing across the night sky. You don't need to hold them. You don't need to solve them. This is your time of rest, your time to be. The night will take care of itself, and the morning will come in its own time. For now, you are safe, you are at peace, and sleep is already near. So drift gently, softly into your dreams, and when you wake, may you carry with you the calm and quiet you found here tonight. Until we meet again, rest deeply, dream kindly, and remember, peace is always within you.